Medics in Gaza say an Israeli airstrike killed 5 Palestinians and left several wounded in tents for displaced people in the west of Khan Yunis.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that Belgium will receive sweeping guarantees in order to unblock a controversial reparations loan for Ukraine.
Farmers in northern Greece escalated protests over delayed EU-backed subsidy payments linked to a corruption probe.
5 Palestinians, including 2 children, were killed by an Israeli strike on southern Gaza on Wednesday, according to local officials. The attack on the shelter camp in Khan Yunis left at least 32 others injured. Israel said it targeted Hamas militants in retaliation for an earlier assault on Wednesday that injured 5 of its soldiers. The latest violence came as another breach of the fragile ceasefire in force since early October that has largely held up despite mutual claims of violations. On Wednesday, Hamas returned one of the last remaining hostages, identified as a Thai national, who was killed during the Hamas-led attack on southern Israel, while Israel indicated it will open the Rafah crossing in the next few days to allow Palestinians in need of medical care to leave for Egypt. According to the Israeli military arm that oversees humanitarian matters, the opening of the Rafah crossing will be coordinated with Egypt under the supervision of the EU mission.
European and Ukrainian officials have accused Russia of faking interest in peace efforts after talks with the US on Tuesday produced no breakthrough or compromise. Ukraine's foreign minister Andrei Sybiha urged Putin to, quote, stop wasting the world's time. And UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper called on the Russian leader to end the fighting and come to the negotiating table to reach an agreement. The comments were made as foreign ministers from European NATO countries met in Brussels on Wednesday, a day after US envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner met with Putin at the Kremlin on Tuesday. For his part, Putin has accused European allies in Ukraine of sabotaging US-led peace efforts. The US proposed a peace deal last month. However, the 28-point plan was met with widespread criticism for being too weighted towards Russian demands. On Thursday, Witkoff and Kushner are set to meet with Ukraine's lead negotiator, Rustem Umerov, for further talks.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that Belgium will receive sweeping guarantees in order to unblock a controversial reparations loan for Ukraine. Belgium remains opposed to the scheme, which would channel frozen Russian assets to cover Ukraine's financial and military needs for the next 2 years. The bulk of the assets, about 185 billion euros, are held at Euroclear, a central securities depository in Brussels.
We have listened very carefully to Belgium's concerns, and we have taken almost all of them into account in our proposal that is today on the table of the reparations loans. We have very strong safeguards in place to protect member states and to reduce the risks as much as possible. Thank you, President.
The reparations loan is von der Leyen's preferred option to cover the 90 billion euros Europe is meant to contribute to funding for Ukraine. Since the start of discussions in September, Belgium has demanded all-encompassing guarantees from other member states to shield itself against retaliation from Moscow and prevent multi-billion euro losses. If no deal is found on the reparations loan, the EU will resort to joint borrowing, as it did during the COVID-19 pandemic. The guarantees outlined on Wednesday present the Commission's most comprehensive attempt to overcome Belgium's resistance before a crucial EU summit on the 18th of December.
The use of drones in the war in Ukraine and the violation of EU airspace by these aircraft requires a realignment of defence strategy, according to the bloc's top military official. All military, political and economic structures of the EU must be prepared and ready to defend themselves, the chairman of the EU Military Committee, Irish General Sean Clancy, told Euronews. To that end, the EU and the NATO alliance need to work together more closely.
There is a stronger relationship required between the EU and NATO. There is a need for coherence. There is a need to eliminate, insofar as practical, duplication. And the Drone Defence Initiative is about actually creating a greater coherence between civil society, the military, and the allies in this instance, of course, and the command and control structure of NATO, and NATO's role in terms of the defence and the deterrence in Europe is sacrosanct.
To better react to hybrid threats, the EU has launched the Drone Defence Initiative, Clancy said. With this instrument, Europe recognises the need for a coherent approach across Europe, as the weaponisation of drones was seen in Denmark, Belgium and Poland.
So this is a pan-European issue, and the hybrid threats are borderless. They're non-discriminatory when it comes to actually malign actors or deliberate actions that are undertaken in this sphere. So this is about actually creating a coherent approach across Europe. The first responsibility, of course, is on individual member states.
The war in Ukraine has led to a combination of trench warfare and the use of drones that has prevented a front line from moving at any important pace, Clancy said. That's why Europe has to prepare for the next evolution of war, which should ensure that the bloc has the necessary resources for research, development and innovation, he concluded.
When the first version of the US-Russia plan was leaked to the media 2 weeks ago, Moscow sought to include a specific demand: amnesty for Russian forces for all they had done since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022. Ukrainian journalist and one of the country's most prominent human rights activists, Maxim Butkevich, spent more than 2 years in Russian captivity. He told Euronews that Moscow is deliberately trying to avoid inevitable responsibility.
Як на мене, це дуже показово, передусім тому, що це означає, що вони розуміють, є за що відповідати. Ще коли я перебував в полоні, було таке, що до мене зверталися мої побратими військовополонені, які питали, коли нас звідси звільнять, чи зможемо ми надати свідчення, наприклад, Міжнародному кримінальному суду або іншим органам, які зможуть притягти до відповідальності тих, хто з нами оце от робили. Є величезний запит на справедливість, на правосуддя.
On the 20th of November, the Council of the European Union imposed sanctions against 10 individuals involved in human rights violations in Russia, including the torture of civilian hostages. The sanctioned Russian individuals are responsible for the death of the Ukrainian journalist Viktoria Roshchina. She died last year after more than a year in Russian captivity. Her body was returned to Ukraine earlier this year, with some of her internal organs missing.
Тема порушень прав людини в цілому на окупованих територіях і порушень прав стосовно українських військовополонених і цивільних незаконно ув'язнених, вона довгий час була не на першому плані. А вона має бути на першому плані, тому що порушення є не поодинокими, вони є системними, вони є поширеними, і права і військовополонених, і цивільних в російській неволі порушуються постійно, системно, це, вочевидь, скоординована політика.
As of November, Ukraine's Prosecutor General's office recorded 190,000 facts related to war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by Russia since the beginning of its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022.
The EU is proposing a new strategy to protect the European economy from coercive trade measures in third countries. The European Security Doctrine is the European Commission's policy to lower dependencies on countries such as China and the US, where recent actions have raised concerns about hostile or coercive measures which could seriously harm European industry. The doctrine recommends, among other things, that member states and businesses diversify supply chains in areas such as critical raw materials, rare earths, semiconductors and technology chips. A recent confrontation between the Chinese and Dutch governments threatened the global automotive industry. EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič said this incident was an example of why dependencies are a vulnerability for Europe.
I think that it just put into the new limelight the importance of the economic security for the European Union, and it just shows that dependencies could be very dangerous, could be very expensive. From the longer-term perspective, I think what is very important is that we would also diversify and increase the number of suppliers of, in this case, legacy chips. But I can speak about critical raw minerals. I can speak about sensitive technologies, because simply when you are reliable just on one supplier, usually it presents it also presents a lot of risks.
At the same time, you can do all these trade deals with other countries, let's say away from China. You can have an economic security doctrine, but really businesses will decide who they want to do their trade with. And often they'll choose price over standards or over security. And that often means China.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think that we are also, with this communication, trying to bring the new light to the economic security aspect of the business. I think that you see it everywhere in the world. You see it in the US, you see it in Japan. I think that this economic security risk premium must be more and more factored in the business plans of European companies. Simply, we need to learn how to be alerted about the possible shortcomings. We have to learn how to stockpile critical raw materials or sensitive products, and we have to be also maybe ready to pay more for the investments, but also for the procuring of the be it critical minerals or critical components from various sources, because this is how you can guarantee your business continuity.